You're watching Mint Deals of the Week, where we'll give you the latest on what's happening in the startup community. Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll take a look at an industry that's seeing an unexpected rise in VC funding, and how measures in the new budget could spell doom for startups in India. Investors are excited about the online shopping space in India, which is still in its nascent stages, but offers huge potential in a country that has 100 million internet users. In 2011, about $500,000 was pumped into the e-commerce industry. But lately, investors have grown a bit concerned about the huge expenses that go into growing and maintaining these sites, everything from things like warehousing to collecting payments. The result has been a surge in investment in companies that will help e-commerce sites address these issues. Our correspondent Deepthi Chowdhury, who reported on this story, joins us from Mumbai, while Padmaja Ruparal, president of the India Angel Network, joins us from her office in Delhi to tell us more. So, Deepthi, tell us more about what's prompting the surge.
Vishali, one of the trends that we have got this year so far is that a lot of e-commerce investors have now deviated their attention to e-commerce ancillaries. One of the reasons cited for is that they want to ensure that their investments in e-commerce firms offer sufficient returns in what is a very crowded market. Another reason is that investors are becoming increasingly extremely uneasy about the tendency of e-commerce companies to burn cash on procurement, warehousing, and delivery. So they are basically trying to create an ecosystem which can support the day-to-day operations of e-commerce firms. Another reason is that they still harbor painful memories of the dot-com boom and bust of 1995 to 2000. One of the biggest reasons cited for that failure was the lack of a supporting system.
And Padmaja, what's your take on these support companies that are getting investments? How much money do you expect to go into companies like these?
I think this is a very interesting space, and I expect a lot of money to go into these startups because remember, India is a large country, distribution, delivery, we are not the greatest on infrastructure, so any venture which is sort of taking into account the infrastructure and building its company on that infrastructure, I think it will see a huge amount of investment.
And there are already a host of companies out there that are providing these support services. Any differentiators in the new crop of ancillary companies that are getting funding?
There are several companies like this which have come up, and I think it's also a mark of the e-commerce space sort of evolving to the next stage. So the earlier round of e-commerce companies were really those companies which were front-ending sales of products or marketing of products. But at the end of the day, revenues don't come from just marketing, it comes from delivery. And for delivering the promised markets or promised products from the e-commerce site, I think there was a constant need that how are they going to deliver the goods? How are they going to collect the monies? How are they going to handle the warranties? And that's the niche that we're now seeing, I think, in an evolution of the e-commerce ventures, of having these companies come in. So all such companies are coming up, and I think it's actually answering the one question that we've been always asking in the e-commerce sector. How are you going to deliver? How are you going to collect the monies? How are you going to handle damaged goods, warranties, stuff like that? So I think that is what I'm seeing as the next evolution in the e-com sector.
Okay, and finally, tell us your take on the overall e-commerce market. Some say it's oversaturated and headed for a bust. What are your thoughts?
I don't see it as a dot-com bust happening, but if it is a portal which is only focused on getting users, then I do think there's a risk there. If it is backed up by this whole delivery arm, be it in-house, be it contracted out, that's a different issue. But unless that delivery happens, the revenues don't happen. Let's be very clear. User valuations are not going to last. We've seen that 10 years ago or 12 years ago, valuation on the basis of users didn't last. Today, the same story is there to that extent, that valuation on the basis of users is not going to last. But if you are able to take that portal, create users, deliver, convert them to customers, deliver to them, collect revenues, give warranties or whatever is required, it should work.
Okay, thanks Padmaja for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vaishali. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And moving on, this year's budget had a lot of surprises for many industries, and startups were no exception. Now, startups will have to pay tax on any money they receive from angel investors, which could have enormous implications for an industry that is important for growth and is a huge job creator. Deepti, tell us more about this tax that the government has imposed on startups.
So startups which will be raising funds from angel investors from this month onwards will have to pay an income tax on the money they receive. What the government has proposed in the union budget is that angel funding will be liable for 30% taxation for the funds raised because they'll be considered income from other sources. To put it simply, any angel funding will have to have a tax of 30%, which will be paid by the promoter.
And what are some reactions you're seeing by angel investors and startups?
Angel investors in general are extremely unhappy about this proposal, and they are saying it's a mechanism to kill startups in the country. The latest that we have heard is that they are proposing to go to the government and talk about this proposal, and the latest what we have heard is that probably there is going to be a freedom of taxation for fundraising up to 10 crore.
Okay, talk a little bit more about the long-term ramifications of such a tax if it's actually implemented.
If the proposal is indeed implemented, it is going to impact angel investors. Angel investors are not professional investors who invest for the sake of returns. Angel investors are people who are passionate either about an industry or a team. This is going to impact angel investors because there is a tendency to stay away from any kind of haziness related to taxation.
Okay, thanks, Deepti. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Mint Deals of the Week.